Our next speaker, Avalon's Tamara Sloper-Harding, is a Navy veteran who served with Interfet in East Timor. She's the driving force behind a community connection between Pittwater and the East Timorese village of Soybata. Let's hear about how Pittwater is helping this East Timorese village. Please welcome Tamara to the Pittwater TEDx stage.
Good morning, everyone, or as they'd say in East Timor, bon dia. Now, when Selena first asked me to come and be part of this day, I said, oh, no. You know, I'm a big fan of TEDTalks, and to me, TED really was all about change makers, people doing things in the world that really make a difference. And then I thought about it to myself, and I thought, well, that's kind of the opposite. My feelings are reluctance, so the opposite to the message I'm trying to convey, particularly to the school children that I talk to all the time. The message that I want to give these kids is that one person can make a difference. One person, one ordinary person, can change the world. Now, I'm an ordinary person. I'm a mum of 4 kids, but everyone can make a little bit of difference to other people's lives in their day. And so, by visiting schools, talking to community groups about the friendship between Pittwater and the small village of Soybata, I like to teach people that they can make a bit of a difference. Now, in April every year, our country commemorates Anzac Day. It's a really big part of our national identity. And the Anzac spirit is something that's become integral to what we think of as Australian. And it's that unquenchable thirst for justice, for peace and equality that really underpins the Anzac spirit. Now, looking for the Anzac spirit within myself and within others is something I try and do to help me achieve our goals with our friendship with Soybata, because it was my own experience of conflict that actually led me along this path in the first place. And strangely enough, it was my experience of speaking at a primary school in Avalon about Anzac Day that actually instigated this whole project. The children's enthusiasm for what one person can do to change the world really started this project, and they asked me to help them do this. And it's grown into something that's so big. So I'll tell you a little bit today about Soybata, our friendship village, about my past and what's drawn me to this village. Now, I was in the Navy for nearly 19 years, and it was quite an exciting life. But I can tell you now that I've got 4 children, it's much more difficult being a mum at home than any operational deployment I ever went on. There's no pay, there's no medals, there's no glory, and it's quite a challenge. But I did find within that time I have at home, I don't have time for a full-time job where I can earn money, but I do have time to do something in the community and reach out beyond our community to the village of Soybata. Now, in 1999, I began this journey, really. And it was a journey I wasn't very keen on taking at the time. It was a journey that's led to the development of a friendship between not just me and the people of East Timor, but our whole community is now involved. And I found the experience something quite challenging. In my time in the Navy, I began as an administrative officer and served at sea on various ships. I worked in PR and personal relations and communications, and eventually I became an intelligence officer. And it was then that I was sent to East Timor as part of Interfet. I actually received the phone call to deploy to East Timor in the middle of our wedding reception. And it's not something that my husband has really quite forgotten yet. So one minute I was up in Manly having a lovely dinner, and the week later I was in Dili, and you can see from the photo what Dili was like in September of 1999. It's a very different environment. It was quite high threat, and for a naval officer, I was used to being on a nice clean ship with flushing toilets and running water, so being deployed with the Army with the ground force was quite a challenge for me. So time went on, and I had my 4 children. But I couldn't get over this tie that I had to East Timor. I really wanted to do something to help the people, because although I'd witnessed all the atrocities and the results of the terror that they'd lived through with the occupation for years and years, I really didn't understand what it meant to the mothers and the women and children until I had my own children. And it wasn't until I had my own family that I could really understand what the people in East Timor went through for all those many years. Now, Australia's had ties to East Timor for a lot longer than most people are aware. We actually first became involved with East Timor in World War II, and over 40,000 Timorese died as a result of protecting our troops. It's not something we get taught about in our schools. It's not something we often hear about in our media, but it's a debt that we have to repay. And it's a debt that we promised to repay at the time, and we stood back and let them down time and time again. Now, in 2010, Pittwater Council signed an agreement with the local government of Soibara, and we became linked in friendship with the village of Soibara, which is in the middle of Manatutu, right in the high mountains of East Timor. Now, one of the most challenging things about this friendship relationship and our attempts to help with sustainable development is listening to the people, and listening very carefully. We mustn't impose our judgment. It's a big challenge for volunteers as we go over there, because we can see so much lacking in their society, so much need, but we must not impose our judgment. We have to listen carefully to what they ask for and accept the priority of tasks as they define them. Now that is often very difficult because they need so much. So in World War II, Sparrow Force were over there. We deployed them there to protect Australia from the Japanese. Now, it's something that we really, really should teach our children about. Our soldiers couldn't have survived in that environment without the Timorese children who protected them. They fed them, they clothed them, they hid them from the Japanese. And when we withdrew, 40,000 Timorese were killed as a result of looking after our troops. So that's quite a substantial number, and something that we should really tell our children about. You can see East Timor is very close to Australia. It's one of our nearest neighbours. It's only an hour's flight from Darwin. And yet, for years and years, people in Australia didn't know anything about it. Soibara, our sister village, was built by the Portuguese. It was the first college to be built, and originally the Portuguese intended for Soibara to be the capital of Timor. You can see one of the old photos from the early 1940s. Well, the buildings still stand, but they suffered dreadfully during the trials of the occupation and the war for independence. So part of our job now is to help these people resurrect these buildings and their lives, make use of what they have. You can see in the environment there what people went through. It was quite horrific. And because Soibara was such a well-known place and such a significant place for the Timorese, it was targeted by the militia and the Indonesians for destruction. Most of East Timor's leaders went to school in Soibara, so Janana Guzmao and Ramos Horta, they trained in Soibara school. So the independence guerrillas actually trained around that area, which made the village a target for the militia. Now, we visit a couple of times a year, and it's just wonderful to have this personal relationship with the communities there. But it took quite some time for us to realise that Soibara didn't just consist of that main central part of the town. It's actually made up of 8 sub-villages called sukos. And now we're creating a relationship between all parts of Pittwater with each suko, each sub-village. And the chiefs have given us lists of what they need and what they'd like us to help them with. One of the main things that all the chiefs have asked for is help with education. Education is where the future will lie for the Timorese. And each school here in Pittwater will eventually be linked up with a school in Soibara. At the moment, we've got 3 already linked, and the children have a relationship with the children in Soibara, and it's just wonderful. It's not all about raising money, it's about the community-to-community friendship, and about our kids learning about their nearest neighbours. So you can see in the slide, A lot of the children here in Pittwater do a lot and learn a lot about social justice and what they can do to make a difference in the lives of these children in Timor. And you can see the conditions the children in Timor have in their classrooms in comparison to our children here. So it's quite a big shock to our kids to realise how lucky they are here on the Northern Beaches and how privileged they are. And to get that sense of social justice and what we can do to make a difference to others. Sorbata is really, really beautiful. It's an amazing spiritual place. The views are fantastic, the history is wonderful. So it's somewhere where it would be fantastic to take tourists for ecotourism. And that's something else that we're going to be looking at. They've actually asked us to bring visitors so that they can create an industry around that and show people they're very proud of the history of this village. They want to tell us about it. It's quite significant in the whole history of Timor-Leste. When we visit, we do fulfil the programs that they ask us to do, and one of the main ones is medical assistance. Doctors from here in Pittwater come over a couple of times a year and mentor and assist the local doctors. We don't take over their programs, we don't rewrite their procedures, we assist them and mentor them. And it's become something that they wait for and ask for every year. So we're heading over again in a week. Dr. Saxon Williams from Avalon, he's leading a medical team, and Dr. Jerry Lake, she's leading another medical team. You can see that there's a lot of young children. Now, over 50% of the Timorese are under 15 years of age. Most families have 7 or 8 kids in them. So there's a big need for preschools. Now, that was one of the things that they asked for the most. We need some preschools. Because at the moment, the preschool age children go to school with their siblings and hang around in the playground, waiting outside to be fed and looked after during the breaks. Luckily, we've just had a proposal approved through Make a Mark Australia to build a $30,000 preschool in Sorbata with mobile resources that can visit each of the sub-villages. So later this year we start construction of that. Now, water is an essential part of life. Clean water. No one can live without clean water. At the moment, there's a river in Sorbata that has no bridge, so in the wet season you can't actually cross it. But the people rely on the water from that river and the streams that flow from it for their everyday living. But they also wash in that river. The animals are also walking around wild near the river. So you can imagine the types of illnesses and diseases that all the people suffer from, particularly the children. We're fortunate here in Pittwater that we have many talented volunteers who've offered their services over in Sorbata, and one of them, Rob Roma from Bilgola, has been putting in Tank Pro water purifiers in the village. So the school children here are raising the money to purchase these, the tanks, the guttering, and the Tank Pro water purifier. So in effect, they're actually saving lives, and they can understand that they're doing that because they're helping the children overcome the waterborne diseases. You can see in this photo the toilet situation in Sorbata. There aren't really any toilets. This is a picture of the toilets in the schools. They're not actually working. So most of the children use the bush surrounding the school, which then of course runs off into the stream where they get their water. We're very fortunate that Rotary clubs around Australia are now supporting this project, and we're about to install toilets in Sorbata School, but it can't end there. The education programs that need to come with the hygiene and sanitation will be next, and then we'll look at putting toilets in the rest of the village. As education is the most important thing, we're not just talking about education of children. A whole generation of people missed out on education during the battle for independence. So we've found, rather than handing out, giving out aid, where it's far better for us to make use of Timorese NGOs and utilise people in the country and some of our volunteers to train the people in the village, to give them the skills that they can be self-sustainable. Now, if someone had said to me 5 years ago, will you take the builder to Sorbata or the hairdresser? I would have laughed. But to be very honest, taking Ian Laidlaw from Scally's in Avalon has helped more people in that village create businesses for themselves, create an income to put their children through school and to feed their families, than any of the builders I've taken with me. It's not to say we don't want the builders as well, but you have to kind of think outside the box a little bit. So Ian's not only taught them the skill, but he's teaching them small business management as well. And the fundraising that we do here in Pittwater pays for young people to go down to Dili and do these courses in business management. Thinking of our discussions about soil earlier today, that's something else we've been doing. Nutrition is something that's very important. And nutrition has been lacking in East Timor for quite some time. They have a very high carbohydrate diet. And it comes from the traditional ways that they've been farming. The women go off to the fields for hours and farm the potatoes, the sweet potato, cassava, and all that sort of thing. The children are left alone in the house. So not only are they not getting the leafy green vegetables that they need, but the older siblings are not going to school because they're at home looking after the children. So combating the nutritional issues has had this flow-on effect to education as well. What we've found is by training the women to do home gardening, do gardening that consists of a sort of leafy green vegetables, tomatoes, all that sort of thing, something that they can do within their homes so they can stay at home and look after the young children. The older children are free to go to school. So we fund a course in Dili at a live-in institution where they learn about composting, they learn about propagation, they learn everything from scratch, and then we fund the community gardens. Sacred Heart School here at Mona Vale has been funding a community garden that's going to be opened next week when we're up there, and that makes such a difference to so many people. The benefit of this project is that it is a two-way thing. It's about friendship, it's about the relationship. And a lot of people in our community really get a great sense of involvement from this. We have groups of women knitting for the children in the orphanage. It's drawn people from all different fields together with a common goal. So it's quite amazing. And the link in friendship between the people here and the people over there is quite wonderful. We're getting a lot of support here in Pittwater for the project as well, for soy barter. As you can see, council are backing us, and so many different Rotary clubs and churches and community groups all over the place. And it's the only way we can do it. We're all volunteers, and we can't make the change for these people without the support of this community. And we're so very privileged here. It's just wonderful to see people getting behind a cause like this for our nearest neighbours. So I think we're very lucky here in Pittwater. And I'm very lucky to have the support of wonderful volunteers to help us with our project in soy barter. And the opportunities that we have for our children here to learn about social justice and what they can do in the world. So thank you for listening, and I'd love to tell you more about it later.